You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. I happen to be sitting up in almost just outside of Parkersburg, Kentucky, heading to Ohio. And I've got a really, really special guest on the phone in Vanessa, Carusone. Let's see if she's a... How you doing there, Vanessa?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm good. Things are going extremely well on this trip. Uh, we're hoping to get up into Ohio later this afternoon, but we've got lots of stuff happening in Northport, and I just thought we'd let you at least talk about the agenda items that are out there, and then we'll get into some hot topic conversation.
Okay. Well, first of all, what I am trying to do is get on a different line, obviously, because there seems to be a lot of crackling. So what I'm going to do is get onto a different computer and see if that works. But in the meantime, our agenda for the 8th is primarily made up of just a discussion of the update of Warm Mineral Springs. And with that, we will, I guess we can go from there. I don't, I'm trying to get online. Hold on one second. But now it stopped. How's that happen? Now I don't hear any crackling. How'd that happen? So anyways, right now, the only two items that are on the agenda are,
I did 3.
I'm talking, are the approval of minutes, presentation of YouTube video, the Centennial video, and then also the Warm Mineral Springs renovation project. So, as you know, they recently approved the plan to go through with all the phases for the project. It was really just an approval of the plan. It wasn't that they were saying, hey, here's $30 million. Let's go ahead and do all these phases right now. It's literally, yes, this is preliminary. This is how we would like to continue phase by phase. And then at that point, all of these different phases would come up before the commission to determine whether they want to spend the money on those CIP capital improvement projects one by one. I know that there's been a lot of talk about how this is not ever going to pay the city back. As it currently stands, I agree. I agree that at this point, they would never be able to acquire all the money that's planned to be placed in it. The decision that was made to only go forward with phase 1 and handle the overflow parking and the drop-off area and some of that kind of stuff that needs to be done anyways. Running the water and sewer there, which is something that's been on the plans for a very long time. And it actually has more to do with others than, there's more people and projects affected versus just this particular project. So I think that that has to be kept in mind because it really will help with the expansion of that loop will help with those on US 41 who have been waiting for water and sewer for a very long time, which are businesses that actually annex within the city of Northport specifically. So I am very happy with the phase 1 issue because, it kind of does some of the simple stuff. It
Yep.
also, as I understand it, includes the refurbishment of all of those specifically historical sites, which is, you know, the cafe and the entry site of the building and some of that other stuff. But more importantly is that cyclorama and any other part that has a historical designation that needs to be updated, needs to be refurbished. The money that goes into that will hopefully be regained by grants at some point. You know, usually grants have this requirement where you have to at least have a match. You know, there usually has to be some sort of skin in the game in order for you to really get on that grant list. So it's my belief that that's what this will do, is as long as it's budgeted, you will then turn around and be able to kind of apply and qualify for many of those grants that are in place for items like this. Specifically, since some of these buildings have already been designated as historical through the state as well as the federal, so the guidelines. So I think that will help immensely. Again, you know, I'm not going to say that it's not a large chunk. You know, I would say that the primary concern really should be just the water and sewer portion of it, because it is sitting on, you know, a area of concern. But after that, I don't know if everything else was such a priority to put off anything that some people may think is a higher priority, because I go back to that same thing that the citizens of Northport don't use Warm Meadow Springs. You know, their community meetings were comprised of people who lived in Warm Meadow Springs who were not Northport citizens or residents. There were a few of them that used the springs that were all the way up in Sarasota, environmentalists, but they were not, you know, those who participated were maybe one or two people. Every time there was a conversation about the master plan, the same people came out and, you know, pushed the fact that they didn't want to see any economic development drivers on there. But really, the bottom line is, if we don't have any economic development drivers, if people think that $17 a year for helping the aquatic center for something that we don't even know is going to make a profit or not, I can tell you right now that the prior investment in this, that $17 will look like petty cash compared to what the taxpayers are going to have to put into it to support something to this degree. Specifically when historical designation has a requirement of things that you need to keep up. So
what do you think that number is going to be in comparison? Let's just take the two and compare them. And I want to thank John Cook for the hellos out there. So he's a faithful listener. But go ahead and talk a little bit about the comparison to where the dollars are going to be dramatically different between the pool and Warm Meadow Springs, and why.
Well, remember that the pool, we have that one-time initial fee, or, you know, the initial investment from the sales tax fund. That's done. It's over with. We will have a minimal maintenance, obviously, employees, training, but all of that, I believe, is not close to what their estimates were when they did this little study that they based all of their numbers off of. My personal opinion is that they looked at the overall Parks and Recs department and utilized this aquatic center as a way to help financially support some of the other things that are not bringing in money. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's, the God's honest truth. However, I find it ironic that more and more projects, programs keep coming in, and yet all that money gets thrown into one pot. So that's a little concerning. But and again, as far as Warm Mineral Springs is concerned, that money goes into a Warm Mineral Springs pot. However, that really only has to do with the contractual amount that we as a city pay, and that the money that comes in, the revenue. So while that revenue and that usually larger capital expenses come out of there, there's not like an allocated amount for maintenance. There's not some other things going on there. So I don't know if I would literally look at that Warm Mineral Springs line item as the end all and be all of what's really going into that.
Well, and I'm going to ask you this because it's really kind of stirred up a lot of people when we talk about the profitability that's being mentioned on Warm Mineral Springs right now, and it's really not a complete assessment of the profitability side of things. It's really the oh my gosh, I just said had it in my head and went away. But there's a operational budget that they're utilizing, but it's not giving what I would consider an accurate picture. It just gives a favorable picture of what people can walk around town and spew about the profitability of Warm Mineral Springs. Because if you look at the overall expenditures and take everything into consideration, is it operating in the black or is it in the red? And I'm going to ask you because you've been a part of Warm Mineral Springs from the start, and I in my heart of hearts, I got to believe that you're not going to tell me that Warm Mineral Springs is operating in the black.
Well, any good business person is going to look at your investment too, and
Yeah.
we invested quite a bit of money into this. And when I say we, I'm talking about, I believe it was 2014, that commission had decided to purchase it back from the city, or the city, Sarasota County.
Yeah.
The big problem was that, you're right, I played a huge part in this because in 2008-9, myself and Shannon Stobbs sat down and talked about the fact that the current owner, who was going bankrupt, was going to put it up for sale had we not, as a joint effort, purchased that property. Because there really is no true environmental protection. There really isn't. You can mitigate anything. That's the bottom line. If you paid enough money, you could have filled the springs in. Let's look at it that way. So in an effort to save the springs, her and I sat down with the Conservation Foundation, some economic development folks, and we really came up with a great plan for that particular area, as well as ways to improve the area surrounding it, with some really big plans for the future, and all of which would be kind of economic driven. However, keeping that in mind, the springs itself and those buildings that are historical would remain and be refurbished. With that said, 2011, 2012 comes around and the city and county collaborations break down, and then millions on top of the, I think it was 2.5 million that we had already spent as in collaboration with the county. More money gets put in. So when you're looking at profit and loss, you have to consider that $5 million that you initially put in. And you should be having a line item that says a payback of that specific amount, which doesn't exist. It's just gone. Then on top of that, you have that $100,000 that's going towards the management. But how many years did it sit there without a management? How many years did it sit there without being open? Well, all that is a negative loss. But yet we still continue to have to do certain things like pay the power, make sure that things were not, the landscaping was kept up. So where is all that money attributed to your initial impact financially? All that should be accounted for, and there should be a payback out of that big whopping, what is it, $100 and something thousand they make a year. When you add up all of those expenditures, not including some of the initial capital improvement expenditures that we had to do in order to make it, health, safety, and well-being, there's never been a profit, to be quite honest. Now you're going to add another 20 million onto that, and unless you're going to get a huge amount of grants, I don't see how it's going to be profitable ever. The other thing is that, when they had that last meeting, they had somebody say that they have reached capacity many times over, but yet these improvements are supposed to increase capacity. Well, if you plan on increasing capacity, how? Because the capacity is already there. Unless they mean by the additional amenities like a walking trail or something, I'm not real sure how that makes sense. If you've reached capacity, you've reached capacity. You know what I mean? But they are talking about additional fees for the cyclorama, additional fees for other parts that are going to be part of this overall master plan. But honestly, I don't know anyone who's going to come pay money to walk a trail around trees when I can do that for free. I don't see anyone paying for, maybe for the cyclorama, but even then, how much money are you going to have to charge to really make that break even, I can't hear you. I think you're muted. Host.
I definitely muted myself. In fact, everybody on the shows right now going, mute him again. Here's the thing with everything that's happening and with everything they're projecting to do, even if you filled the park, I don't know that you could ever recoup enough money that we're spending if we're going to go down the path of making it a park. I love our park system. I think our Parks and Rec department does an outstanding job. I don't think that this is part of their overall picture. What I think is happening is that there's a group of people who want it to become something it was never destined to be. Because when it was originally purchased, and you would be that voice, was supposed to be with walking path, or was it to be something that generated revenue back into the city?
Well,
did you hear what I said?
I'm thinking that, John, it's your actual service. Thank God it's not mine. Because you keep freezing and it's really hard to hear you.
I'm sorry.
But I think originally the plan was to, like I said, make sure that those buildings were preserved. and create a amphitheater in the back where, where there was a large portion of the area. We also talked about definitely running the water and sewer, of course, but we were going to do a collaborative effort to improve the Ortiz Boulevard. And then there was going to be small shops, different items that could be put onto the property, but yet not impact the environment. So with that said, yes, there were ways that we could have it as an economic driver, whether it be land lease deals, whether it was we build it and then they lease it, period. But a large part of it had to do with that, that northern end that had the most open space, and really allowing some things to take place there that would have brought in money. And then on top of that, there were parcels that we were talking about that would kind of be inspired to be built on, which we've had a problem with, most likely because we have no utilities in that particular area. But the other thing was to connect the trail system to the Patrol track, which is just north of it, and having, some sort of a recreational trail there. So there was a lot of things that we talked about that would have inspired the economic side of things. And when I brought all this up, pretty much the commission, and it was mostly those who live in War Mineral Springs. Again, live in War Mineral Springs. I want to enunciate that. That said that they didn't want that kind of stuff going on. They would rather leave it as is. A lot of people were concerned about the environmental portion and the more or less the historical archaeological portion of that kind of the east end, where they've supposedly found some sort of human remains from local tribe. So with all that said, everybody started, kind of saying, yeah, we don't want anything done there. So the commission at the time didn't see that this could have more of a revenue than what they're being proposed. But with that said, what they did was just approve a plan. And I try to hone in on this, is that, they did not say we're going to spend $20 to $30 million of your money. What they said was, on the surface, these are the phases we'd like to see done. This is the estimate, the cost estimate. This is our priority phase one that we are going to go ahead and go through with. But the others we will speak about on a kind of a la carte basis. So, for the most part, what they did really was the best thing they could have done, was, prioritize those buildings and what was absolutely basic necessary to keep this place open and to at least keep the revenue flowing. But you're absolutely right. It'll never recoup the investment. It just won't.
And see, I kind of find myself on both sides of the fence with their decision, because they have continued down the path of which I know that they need to continue down because of the lack of maintenance that had been done to Warm Miller Springs for now, I think, close to at least a decade. And yes, while the city of Northport has put Band-Aids on things and corrected some things, that's just Band-Aids. We're talking about some major undertaking that has not been there probably since the buildings in the 70s. Because I've been here 22 years. I've never seen anything done to really give an update other than what we're about to do. And I'll let you, Vanessa, I'll let you go ahead and read Peter's question and see if you can put some answers to that.
So Peter's question is, if you change a fee for the cyclorama, if you charge, listen, I'm on the phone, it's very small. If you charge a fee for the cyclorama, you will have additional costs, someone to collect the fee, inside personnel and security actors, etc. That will take a huge number of people to cover the costs. Maybe, I'm not sure if Peter remembers the cyclorama, maybe he wasn't here, but it really does not need much. What would happen is that you would go to the main office where you would pay for the spa, and you would just get a ticket, and a person would be at the cyclorama. You would walk to the cyclorama, you would hand the ticket to the person there, and you literally walk around like a museum. So there were no actors there. There really was minimal labor that I remember. Now, mind you, I was very young. I was like in middle school when I went there. And the biggest thing that I remember as a child going there when everything was running was the archaeological museum that they had, that as you entered in, they had this kind of, it was like a makeshift museum where you saw all of the archaeological items that they had collected from Little Salt Springs. But on top of that, some of the Indian heritage type of items. And as a child, I thought, this is cool. I didn't really like the cyclorama so much, but I thought that part was cool. So I don't see it being a very large expense to reopen the cyclorama. I really don't. I think the expense will be in the caretaking of the rest of those phases, the phase 2, 3, and 4. To have an open air facility, which I'm trying to see how they exactly word it. They call it a multi-purpose shelter, where it's 90 degrees here 90% of the time. I just, it's still something that bothers me. I really wanted to see us put that amphitheater out there. I really wanted us to be able to bring in, large, and not large, they're not large, because, coming from New Jersey, let me just say this, we had an amphitheater, and there you would see, folk groups that would come and sing, and they weren't, huge. Maybe they were just starting out, but a lot of kids shows took place there. And you'd have maybe 400 people, 500 people. Some of them are smaller, but I always remember those really cool shows that they had on a stage. Do you guys remember that elephant crew, the Skid and Marinky Dink people? Come on, you got grandkids. Yep. John, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Well, I saw them there in New Jersey, and they had the elephant on the stage, and I thought that was just the coolest thing. That kind of amphitheater would be really neat, because they had, it was open, it was outdoors, but it was New Jersey. So, you could probably do something similar, but a larger scale that brought in a little bit, larger types of shows that were not so impactful, like something you'd bring to the Brave Stadium, but yet something you could earn a revenue and also increase your tourism. So, but some, there was a lot of items we talked about that just because of the environmental, archaeological concerns and the immense amount of people that showed up from the area of Warren Mineral Springs and those environmentalists from other areas that voiced their opinion, we are with the master plan that we have. So phase one,
Peter brought a lot of, actually, he brought up a good point there too. And he said, what would be the impact of 100 or 200 cars in an hour's time frame on Ortiz?
So that was part of that whole conversation with the county. That was kind of why it was so important that we kept that partnership with the county, was because they were going to help with that Ortiz expansion, and we talked about having it as the, some sort of a beautification project, that we would have it as kind of like a welcoming type of entranceway where we would have the pavers and the whole Northport theme. But, when that whole conversation broke up with the county, now, in order for you to get those improvements, I don't see the county footing any bill at this point, not if it's just specific to help out Warren Mineral Springs. So, that partnership and its depletion really did hurt the future of Warren Mineral Springs, and I think it did delay some of the things that we're just talking about today by years. I think that ultimately there's going to have to be a partnership once again, whether it just be on the project of Ortiz, or whether it be specific to getting a larger project, if it continues to be under the city's rule, a larger project with the county as a partnership, because honestly, some of their funds are designated to items like this.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions because of your history and your knowledge on all this. And my first question is, would you have voted to do the $9.2 million on water, sewer, and the restoration that 3 out of the 5 voted yes on? Would you have voted yes for that if you were a commissioner?
Not if it was coming out of the money that they said it was coming out of. From what I understand, they plan on taking it out of the CARES Act funds that were supposed to go towards fire, police, and that concerns me, because that's not where COVID money should be going to. COVID money should be going to those particular departments that actually were impacted. It should have went to social services. It should have went to fire. It should have went to police. That's where those services were needed. That's where they saw the most impact from this pandemic. The building department. Those are, just the building department and their permitting alone has seen such a great impact. So I personally think that if the CARES Act money was handed to them, it should have went towards those that were impacted the most, those who lost the most, because parks did not lose the most. If anything, parks were utilized, overutilized. Maybe we had different people making decisions, we probably could have capitalized on it. But the bottom line is that we should have put that money towards the places where it was earned, essentially. So with that said, maybe you could have shifted some of the capital improvement monies that were put in those particular projects. I don't know. I gotta be honest, I am not real thrilled with the budget. Definitely not thrilled with the way the budget went last year. And I'm really concerned about this year's budget. But I think that there were maybe other ways that it could have been accomplished, maybe not immediately, but definitely ways that we could have got in there and found that that Tallahassee money like we did the last time, and got that, and then shift some money around or something, because utilities department has a fund balance. So as I understand it, though, that $9 million is then going to go back to parks if it's utilized from parks. So wherever it's utilized from, utilities will have to pay it back, because they're set up as a separate entity. And a lot of people don't understand that, because utilities is a separate entity. It's like having a corporation.
Right.
The city's the corporation, and then you have your LLCs underneath it. You've got your utilities department, your public works, or your road and drainage, and then you have fire department. All three of those, I'm sure I'm missing something, but all those are separate. They're separate entities. So you can't, you should not be, according to the specific accounting, whatever, Lear could have told you that one. You should not be commingling those funds. In fact, I think that it was like 2002, we kind of got in trouble for taking our managers from the general fund and putting them into districts. So we had to kind of go back and make sure that we did that right. But my point is that I don't even remember my point, but I think
Different
that
funds.
I think that had I known that that money would come back to the original source, I probably would have voted for it. But I didn't see that in the backup. So on top of that, I mean, yes, I think you will earn that money back because of the user fees. I really do, because you're going to have a lot of businesses that wind up getting hooked up that are not able to right now. So I think you will see a return of investment in that particular portion of that project. But I do think that there were other financial or but financial streams that we could have looked at that were specific to that project. It would have been time consuming, that's all. And work.
Go ahead. And work, is that what you said? And work? Yeah, I'm glad you put it the way you did, because it kind of enlightens the conversation a little bit from, oh my gosh, here's what we went and did, to we did this, but the end result is, even though we took the easy route, so to speak, and sped things up, some return is going to come back from hookup. Are you concerned with the money, that $9.2 million going back to Parks and Rec?
One more time. I didn't hear you.
Are you concerned about the 9.2 going back to Parks and Rec when it is paid back?
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure who it originally comes from. I'm going to try my earphones. This might help. Okay, let's try it this way.
Oh, that
Can you
is
hear
better.
me?
Much
Okay.
better.
All right. So I would have to look through my notes to find where that reimbursement goes to. But I think it's 1.2 million that's part of the water expansion, and it would be paid back to whoever it is that 1.2 million comes from. So if it's utilized out of, say, the Parks and Recs impact fees, then that would go back to Parks and Recs. If it's used from the CARES Act money, then it would go back to the general fund. You see what I'm saying? So it would really determine on where that money is pulled from.
Well, and like I said before, I don't want to pick on Parks and Recs because I think they do a good job, but at the same time, that if that money was coming in from the general fund and it got paid back to the general fund, it can be utilized in multiple different fashions than Parks and Rec.
Correct.
And
Correct.
and therefore the taxpayers, even if you disagreed with some of this, I think would tend to, as long as it was paid back through time, I'm sure, but as long as it was paid back, you could kind of see your way through it.
Well, it would. It has to be paid back. That's kind of the point. That 1.2 million that's going for the water expansion absolutely must be paid back, because again, this is how I explain that we're talking about different entities. You know, that while the commission is, or that the commission is that corporation, but yet the utility department is that LLC. You have to put it back. So there's no question about it. No matter where they get that money for the expansion of water and sewer, it's got to be paid back. And that would be paid back through hookups and hookup reimbursements and some other ways.
Bill English said, wasn't it paid for by the park surtax?
Wasn't what paid for?
He thought that it was being paid for through the surtax. The 9.2.
No, it's 1.2 million for the water expansion only. And I know they had a big discussion about it coming out of the CARES Act money, because the CARES Act money was specific to infrastructure, or it could be used for infrastructure. I would have to look at my notes. Let's see. But yeah, that was what it was a part of. It was not, and I don't, you couldn't use park impact funds for water and sewer expansion anyways. Park impact fees are similar to any other impact fees. It's about adding additional parks. So the only way a park impact fee can be utilized is for additional parks. This is not an additional park. It's currently existing. If you add an expansion, you might be able to do that. But, you know, I have to wonder how much money is in the utilities fund balance or capital improvement plan that you couldn't have shifted from one to another and used it right out of there instead. So you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul is essentially what you're doing. But yeah, it was 1.9, 1.7, 1.9 million. Let's see. So they're claiming that $750,000 of the park's impact fees could be used, which I would imagine would be part of the expansion of those other phases, because that will be an addition to the park. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
As far as, I mean, maybe they can use some of it towards the water and sewer expansion, because it essentially will abut to the new park area. I'm not sure. I would have to re-listen to that again, because I don't think there was any real conversation about, you know, how, why, or if. Just that it was told that it can be used. Now, in the same token, you know, we've been told things can be used only to find out they can't. So we'll see.
Where do you see Warm Mill Springs going at the pace we're going right now? Where do you, because you were part of the original voting to bring Warm Mill Springs into Northport along with the county, where do you see Warm Mill Springs going today? And is that the path that it should be on, in your professional opinion?
Where do I see it going today? Or am I looking at my crystal ball as to what's actually going to happen?
Let's try both.
If they continue on the path of where they are today, it will become a huge debt. It's going to really create a big problem for the Parks and Recs department, because honestly, they can't. There's no way they'll be able to continue to pay back if they don't pay, if they even pay it back. I mean, really, if you think about it, the Parks and Recs may not. They may just take that 20 million and say, okay, see you later. I mean, it's not unheard of. It's been done before. But in the same token, I think that you're going to see it lose money ultimately, because you can only do so much, you know. You can only do so much with a walking path. You can only do so much with a tree stand. You know, you can only do so much with the cyclorama. There's only so much you can do with what's being planned. It's not going to, with what is being planned, you're not going to produce enough revenue to ever make money. So there's that. What do I see in my crystal ball? I see a completely different master plan being approved down the line when we get some commissioners in there that have the capability of seeing that this particular plan will not be able to support itself no matter how much you put into it. I do see that at some point in time, this will be getting the grants that are necessary to help with paying back some of those items that they're going to expend on this phase one. I also see that, you know, they're not only are they going to get grants for those for the utilities and some other things that are being you know, pointed out in this phase, but I think that what you're going to see is also some money being gathered for refurbishment of those historical buildings. So I don't see all doom and gloom, and that, you know, I think honestly, ultimately, when a new commission, a new city manager are put in place, and the citizens really see how this impacts them on a financial side of things, I think you're going to be surprised, because I think ultimately the public's going to force the commission to reevaluate that master plan and make sure that it's feasible.
Do you think not having a current city manager who is, you know, permanent in the position, do you think that hurts us right now with some of these decisions that are being made?
I think it's detrimental. I think that not only that you have someone who's not permanent, but someone who doesn't live here, who's not vested here, who doesn't have any concern about the well-being of the future of the city. That's the bottom line. I mean, you're going to have some concern because, you know, it's your job to have concern, but honestly, unless you live here, it's really not, it's not your vested interest. I think that is the number one thing that our earlier commission had done, you know, was to make sure that our charter officers lived in the city. Granted, the city attorney does not, for good reason, but nonetheless, hers, you know, the city attorney doesn't really have that vested interest as much as, you know, the city manager. So I do agree. I do think that all of those issues with the city manager not being fixed are a part of several things that are an issue. Because this is only one. It really is. It's only one. War Mill Springs is just a small slither of the grand scheme of things that need to be addressed. If we don't address our fees in the building department, the way that road and drainage and the building department are adhering to codes within the context of how they believe they should be adhered to. If we don't address some of the fees that are now all of a sudden they should have been charged this way but weren't, we don't address some of those things that are driving our commercial businesses out of here, that are some of our contractors are saying they'll never work in the city of Northport again.
I've heard that from home builders too, where they're absolutely, they come here because we have the space to build, and because of the zoning and permitting departments, it's absolutely one house.
Ludicrous.
Well, it's, you build 5 houses in Port Charlotte to 1 in Northport, and anytime that you build 5 to 1 in other communities, your model home is now sitting on Price Boulevard, pushing revenue to other communities, and I know for a fact it's a major problem within the housing department, within the housing and building. It's just, there's such a huge discrepancy on what happens within the permitting department, and I've been a part of inspections where on new builds where the homeowner has shown me what they said they needed to fix 2 more times out, and it's just continued nitpick this, nitpick that, and it's a different person each time that causes the grief, and so you never get consistency. And we've got 1 minute left, but
let me just tell you, let me just kind of throw out there, I have been told that it was overheard that they fail on purpose inspections. Someone needs to really look into that entire department, because there's a lot of stuff going on that, like I said, Wormmill Springs, yeah, it's huge. Don't get me wrong. Phase 1 is taking care of stuff that needs to be done anyways. But quite honestly, people pay attention to the budget. I swear to you that if you don't pay attention to this budget this year, there's going to be big problems. And when you get that final notice, that's when everybody's going to show up. And then it's too late. Nobody showed up at those budget workshops. Nobody. Nobody even sent in a public comment card. This is huge. And it happens every year. Don't get me wrong. But this is the year where everybody is on shoestrings. Well, unless you're a realtor. A shoestring budget. And honest to God, this is the time that everybody better start watching, because you know what? Even the realtors need to watch, because the year after, we may not be in this same position.
Well, we ought to go, but let me tell you, I appreciate everything, and let's cue that up the next time, and really start talking about some of the things that really are impactful in the city. But this is John Rawlings and Vanessa Carusone saying, thanks a lot. Have a great 4th of July weekend. Be safe out there. Drive careful, and you guys have a blessed weekend. We'll talk to you guys